Friends, in this video I am going to talk on the topic, who is your real teacher? It's Teachers Day. A lot of people are feeling very happy about all they learned, feeling grateful to the people who taught them a lot of things, and also acknowledging all the learnings or all the teachers. It's a good thing to have that humility, because we live in an era where people don't want to reveal where they learned something, but would be very happy to reveal how they know everything. So that's the social media era. So in this era, for people to actually be thankful is a nice thing. But there is something more to learning than just being in touch with people whom you consider teachers. When you are around people whom you consider teachers, you broadly imbibe from them. They don't actually sit you down and teach you anything. In the investment world, a lot of learning is broadly just imbibing. And when you imbibe, you don't go back and ask that person, did you actually mean this? You understand what they tell in the way that you want to understand. Only when somebody puts down their learnings in the form of a book or a journal can you really say that you have imbibed it carefully. Otherwise, a lot of teaching and learning always has a gap between what the teacher is trying to tell and what the learner is receiving. There is always a gap. This gap can narrow only if that learning happens in a written form, or there is a documentation of what is learnt and a validation. Now, this rarely happens in the investment world. For the record, Warren Buffett has not written anything. It's only others writing on how they perceive what he has done. Or sometimes him talking to somebody, that person receiving it and journaling it. In the case of Indian investors, mostly it is folklore. There are very few books which actually interact with an investor, collect his thoughts in writing, play it back to him, get it validated and then get published. That's a rarity. That's a rarity not just in India. Luckily, we have had a few, but it's an absolute rarity even in the Western world. You have to be very, very careful. So, this learning which we think is happening may not be happening in the most efficient way. That's something I want to flag today. That efficiency has to be raised. But there's another learning which I think is very, very critical, which we control far better, and that is learning from our own mistakes. Every one of us makes mistakes in our investing. And the natural tendency is to not think about those mistakes once you have walked away from them or once you have done with them. Because we feel thinking about the mistake will bring back another mistake. Somehow psychologically that is the mindset of most of us. But it is important to think about the mistake, to let the mistake sit in your mind for long periods of time. And then out of the mistake, you have to bring out something which will be very, very valuable and give a very positive and different outcome when the learnings are applied constructively later. So, you must turn your mistake into an opportunity. But before that, you must learn from your mistakes. You must be able to externalize your mistake, take your mistake and keep it at a distance from you, and then talk about it or write about it or critique it or say how it should have been done differently. Record what could have been a better way of doing what you did wrong. In the sense, record how you could have done it right. Record how you could have avoided making a mistake and doing something else which would have been right. And keep going over it again and again and again. If you manage to do that, then you externalize the mistake. You learn from your mistake. And when you learn from your mistake, I think the learning is far more powerful than learning from somebody else, because you don't often get the exact drift of what somebody else is saying. You understand it in a very different way, but whereas when it concerns you, you can't misunderstand your mistake. You can't misunderstand what you ought to do because you can't misunderstand what you are clear about. Your own clarity becomes your teacher. But attaining that thought clarity is never easy. Attaining that thought clarity requires consistent, concerted effort. It involves time. It involves documentation. It involves contemplation. It involves analysis of the past. And it involves ideation of the future. You need to think about how you'll do the same thing in the future differently based on how you went wrong in the past. Mentally, you have to walk away from the past into the present and walk in the right direction so that your future goes to a better place or you get taken to a better place in the future. Now, all these things are within your personal control. That's the good news. But it is not easy to practice. That is the bad news. But an investor's learning from himself is significantly higher, stronger, and more result oriented, productive than an investor's learning vicariously from somebody else who is at a distance. This is something which may not look very believable on the surface of it. But when you start believing this, you start doing your investing very differently. You start reinventing yourself every time there is a need to do so. And you don't waste time trying to apply what worked in somebody else's life. But instead, by looking at your own investment life, you start thinking what you can do better, when you can do it better, how you can do it better, and what will change about your investing. That sharpens what you do in your own investing. It sharpens your mind, preparing you to become a better investor. And it sharpens the entire process which you deploy between the time you think of an investment and the time you sell an investment. And in between, your life becomes far more quieter, far more organized, and extremely well purposed. That is essentially what an investor must learn now, because these are very noisy times and the noise levels in the investment world are only going to get higher and higher and higher. Under the circumstances, you need to go to a place which is quieter and more conducive to improving yourself. Thank you for watching this video.